streets of Moscow thick with protesters today. Our own bureau chief, Greg White, was on the streets. There's his footage. Protesters called this a 100,000-person demonstration against the rule of Vladimir Putin. The police, they put it at 20,000 only. Welcome to Main Street this afternoon. I'm Dennis Berman of the Wall Street Journal. A lot happening in Moscow today. Greg White, our bureau chief in that city, is going to join us by telephone. Greg, some very interesting photos there, or video, I should say. Some beautiful images of those flags fluttering in the wind, but it seemed to be anything but a beautiful moment and a beautiful mood in that crowd.
Yeah, the mood was actually better than certainly the previous demonstration a little over a month ago when there were skirmishes with police and hundreds of detentions. This one went off without incident. Both the police and the demonstrators were very calm, and the mood was reasonably positive.
And now can you tell our viewers, Greg, what were they protesting? We've seen these sorts of demonstrations for a long period right now. The Putin administration has responded in kind by raising fines and fees and arrests. What is their grievance?
This is the same part of the wave of demonstrations that began last December with the parliamentary elections, where there were widespread allegations of vote fraud, and that brought out the middle class in Moscow. A broad range of different people who are unhappy at the lack of voice in the political system, feel like they're fed up with Putin's political monopoly and want a chance to participate in the political process and have their voice be heard. The demonstrators in these marches have been a real broad range from ultranationalists, even monarchists, to leftist, the Red Front and that sort of thing crowd. So it's really a broad.
And for that reason, how much credibility do they have in Russia more broadly? Because
so far, it's basically an expression of frustration, and clearly the message today was that these people aren't going anywhere. Even after Putin won the election in March and was inaugurated in May, there were some signs that maybe the protest activity would sort of fade. These people, they aren't going anywhere. They're unhappy. They want their voice to be heard. They don't yet have leaders that they can all agree on or an agenda. They haven't quite figured out whether they should be calling for early, reruns of the parliamentary and presidential elections, or maybe they should be more realistic and target, city council, things like that. So it's going to take a while, but clearly the protest mood isn't fading. People are still unhappy with Putin's return to the Kremlin.
And there we see some Russian troops moving in, Greg. I think it was the day remained peaceful. I think perhaps the big question, though, in a lot of people's minds is about their standard of living. Oil prices, energy prices generally, which sustain the Russian economy, have helped push up the standards of living for a number of Russians. You've done a lot of great reporting on this. How is that tempered with the reaction to political outlets and political expression?
Well, that's the big question. The bulk of ordinary Russia outside the capital, the folks who haven't had years of prosperity and foreign vacations and don't sort of tote their iPads everywhere. Obviously, for them, life is much more about day-to-day concerns, and politics are pretty far away from them. And they've been largely okay, according to polls, with the sort of Putin. Well, I'll run politics, and you just enjoy life. That seems to be changing slowly out in the regions. Some of the opposition leaders today were saying they think that if oil prices fall and the economic situation here darkens substantially, then you might get protests, particularly out in the regions, from people motivated more by sort of socioeconomic forces rather than political demands, but that would all sort of merge with this broader political opposition. At the moment, it's unclear just whether that would materialize. Russians have shown, over the years, a great willingness to put up with extraordinary difficulties.
I know, and that's sort of what strikes me, seeing these images. People there in Pushkin Square, and I can't help but think of the Potemkin village, right? The Potemkin village of protest, that if I had to guess, we'd be here a year from now, 2 years from now, Greg, talking about the protests that are still ongoing. But there will probably be a lack of real political change in Russia or opposition. And for that reason, I just get the feeling that this is kind of a display, but there probably will be no real-world effects. Is there any scenario where that really happens?
Well, no, I think that's probably too strong. I mean, clearly, after the demonstrations back in December, the Kremlin moved on things. They didn't, rerun the elections or give in to the demands of the demonstrators, but they did move for reintroducing elections for regional governors, repealing very strict regulations on party registration that essentially made it impossible for the opposition to register parties. So, and these were reforms that even just months before the Kremlin had said, well, this will be decades before we'd ever consider doing this sort of thing. So they clearly reacted, and the environment is changing slowly in response to the numbers that come out in the streets.
So it's not,
so we've seen a mix of sort of crackdown and gradual steps at reform, and I think it'll continue that way. The authorities will move, just only as much as they have to, depending on what society demands of them.
I hear you. Well, Greg, we have to go in a moment, but it seems that what you're saying here is that there is some raw material. Perhaps what this movement needs, what these people we see right there on camera, perhaps what they need is a real identifiable leader. The material is there, someone just has to mold it.
That's right. Yeah, we're still looking for that.